He's an absolute master of electronic jazz, more traditional bebop jazz, and he has the distinction of having played on David Bowie's final album, Black Star. It's Mr. Mark Guiliana, if you didn't know, and he is going to be doing a signing on the Sabian stand at 4:15 today, and he also has his new book there as well, well worth checking out. So here he is, Mr. Mark Guiliana.
You alright? Yeah. A lot of people, that's cool. How many drummers? How many people who love music? Alright, great. Me too. Yeah, so I just thought I'd play a little bit and maybe talk a bit about what I think about when I'm playing music, and could play some more. And then if there are any questions, I'm happy to try to get to some of those. But overall, my goal is to just, try to make as much music as I can with this instrument and really be present for you guys. Especially with the performance, I don't have much of a plan, but that is the plan, right? It's very important to me to give you everything that I have in this moment, and specific to this instrument, specific to this room, and you guys. So we're in this together, and thank you for being here. It's very cool. Thanks. What was that? Great question. Again, for me, that was just, wow, I don't know. I love the drums, I love playing music, and as much as I love playing the drums, I prefer to play with other musicians, actually. But in this case, I'm still trying to address that moment the same way I would as if I was playing with other people. Just trying to, make the best decisions for the music in each moment. So when I'm alone, I'm kind of in charge, so it can go anywhere. But I'm still trying to be very respectful to a bit of a shape. And again, just trying to talk to you guys. The way you were listening, you deserve a round of applause for, actually. It's really inspiring for me to play quiet and really explore that part of the drums, and you guys allowed me to do that. Not every time you play will you be able to, be so free with where you can go, but I was inspired by your attention, and I tried to take advantage of that. Not of you, but of your attention. So, for me, the goal is pretty simple. It's to just be present and try to. I think there's two main important things that are happening when we play music. I think the first thing is listening. Because in order to know what's best for the music, you have to first identify what that might be. So that comes from listening and attention to detail in the moment. And it's only then, after you've identified what you think is best for the music, that now it's the time to try to execute that, to try to play it. But I think sometimes it's easy for us to get stuck in the playing of the ideas, as opposed to trying to be aware of which ideas we need to play. So, how many of the drummers here have practiced before? I hope all of you. How many practiced this morning? Yeah, right on. Great. I didn't. I wish I could. But I think, with all this practicing that we do, it's really easy to start to get attached to certain things. And it can then be difficult to detach ourselves from these things that we've worked on and that feel really good to play. But it doesn't mean, the things that we're practicing aren't necessarily the right things for the music that we'll be playing. So one of my favorite musicians is Wayne Shorter. Does anyone know who Wayne Shorter is? Plays saxophone. He's from New Jersey, like me, so that's a good thing. Wayne Shorter is one of the greatest musicians in the world, and he talks a lot about improvising, and he talks about the unknown. So if you're truly improvising, it's impossible to predict what's going to happen. So we can't plan for the unknown, but he does talk about preparing for the unknown. So it's two very different things. We're not planning, but we're preparing. So when I'm practicing, I'm trying to avoid anything too specific. Because I know, speaking for myself, I'm quite tempted. You're playing and you're like, oh, that's cool. And once you do that, you place that idea in a different part of your brain, and there's a good chance that idea might appear more often in the music than the things that you said aren't cool. But how do we know that cool idea is going to be the right thing in that moment? Does that make sense? So I just try to spend my time with the instrument preparing. So I'm working on trying to get a good sound, play with good time. I'm working on much bigger picture things. And to be honest, what I'm practicing is quite boring, but I've found that that's what gives me the most enrichment and prepares me the most for each situation that I'll be in. So I think one of the biggest the most important things in improvisation and in creativity in general is curiosity. You know, sorry, playing first always gets me a little winded, I apologize. But I think curiosity is such an important aspect of who we are as musicians. You know, I think this specific setup is maybe small by some people's standards, but actually I look at it and I think to myself, I don't even need all of that. Why do I need that second cymbal? You know, of course it's a luxury and it's a beautiful sound that I try to take advantage of, but I'm always trying to get the most from whatever's in front of me. And I think that comes from curiosity. So, I think one's limitations doesn't come from any external elements. It doesn't come from the instrument. It doesn't come from your setup or the quality of the gear, anything like that. It comes from our imagination, right? So we have to take hold of our curiosity and our creativity and really try to inject it into all the music that we're making, because we are all capable of a really unique musical statement. And for me, the thing that excites me the most is when I hear people who sound like themselves. And that takes a lot of work. It's really hard. It's hard. But I found that sometimes getting to the core of who I am as a musician is more about what not to do rather than what to do. So, you know, when I was younger, you know, my drum heroes, I have so many, but, you know, Tony Williams, do you know who Tony Williams is? Only a few of you? If anyone, this is totally okay if you don't know who Tony Williams is, but if you don't, if the only thing you take from this class or this presentation is to go check out Tony Williams, success. Elvin Jones, Roy Haynes, Art Blakey, Jack DeJohnette, these guys are really the guys who I have looked to and continue to look to for encouragement and inspiration as to what's possible on this instrument. And but the problem with checking these guys out so much was that I was tempted to attempt to play what they were playing. And by doing so, I was blocking the tunnel in which my ideas were to be expressed. So, you know, I used to sit down and start to improvise, and if I played anything that reminded me of anyone else, I would stop. Stop and I would put the sticks down and try to reset. So, on a good day, that would be maybe 20 seconds. On a bad day, it would be 1 second. See, oh, that was Roy Haynes. All right, stop. And now this exercise is just building awareness and intention in my own playing. So now, if that happens, I hope it's happening out of respect and a tribute to these guys, as opposed to an unintentional delivery of someone else's ideas. Because if I fill myself up with other people's ideas, then I have no room to express my own. So I can't encourage you enough to just sit down and just try to play. Just, that's valid. This is valid, this is cool, this is cool. It might start as being a very abstract expression, but for me, I had to go to that extreme to start to get to know the feeling inside of my body, what it feels like to make a statement that feels unique to me. So, let's see, maybe I'll just play a little more and see what happens. Remind you of? You. Thank you. let's observe what was happening. What instruments did I hit? Snare drum, rack tom, floor tom, bass drum, hi-hat. No cymbals, right? So in this case, you know, one of my favorite things, again, maybe my favorite thing about music is improvising. I love that freedom. But sometimes one of my least favorite things is the exploitation of that freedom. Does that make sense? Sometimes we can get away with like, oh, I can just do whatever I want. And you really do whatever you want and it makes no sense. I'm certainly guilty of that. So for me, I'm always trying to inject a certain amount of discipline and organization into this really free space. So in this case, it was kind of the two rules that I stumbled upon were, okay, I'm not going to hit the cymbals. So that's, you know, giving me a framework in regards to sound. And then rhythmically, I started playing the hi-hat on 2 and 4 of the pulse that I started to hear in my mind. So I created a box from which I can now do whatever I want, as long as I stay in that box. Does that make sense? So I think, like for example, let's do this. I'm not packing up. These are beautiful instruments, by the way, as I dismantle them. So beautiful. So now, kick, snare, hi-hat, okay? Just for dramatic effect. I'm gonna put this like this. Wow. Wow, so cool. All right. Kick, snare, hi-hat. Let's see what happens. Now, all these things that I've worked on that feel so comfortable moving between the drums or reaching for the cymbal for a long sound, they've all disappeared. So now, I can't play that cool Roy Haynes thing where he goes to the tom, or I can't do that Art Blakey thing on the Bell of the Ride. I'm trying to chip away at all these unintentional, musical choices to try to get to, to learn about who I am as a musician. Raise your hand if you wished to hit the rack tom. Please. Please don't. Please don't. For me, of course, removing that instrument is the best way to not hit it, right? But, I've really tried to not have to remove the elements in order to not hit them. I think discipline within this freedom is a great way to get closer into avoiding certain habits and trying to get to some new stuff inside your body. Very rarely will the new stuff come from reaching outside of you for new things, because that's other people's stuff. That's very important, and I still do that every day. But I think we all owe it to ourselves to reserve some time to look inside and really try to figure out what's in there. And it doesn't have to be incredibly unique or incredibly virtuosic or anything like that. It just needs to be you. I feel like sometimes, not to turn this into a therapy session, but sometimes I feel like I'm more myself, and I learn more about myself when I'm playing music than when I'm not. Because again, it's a very difficult process, but I get to places inside my body when I'm playing with musicians that I love to play with. Every now and then I find a new place that's truly a new place for me. And once I kind of tasted that feeling, that's when I was hooked. That's why I have to be playing music for the rest of my life, because I'm in pursuit of that feeling. And that exists inside of us, so it's just a matter of trying to find it. Does that make sense? It's there already, is what I'm saying. So we just got to do a little homework to find it, and then once you find it, speaking from my own experience, it's just such a joyful place. So, is that too heavy? Is that okay? Like I said, I love music, I love to create, I love to explore. So thank you for that opportunity to do so and to share some of my thoughts. It's, it's important. It's important to interact, to come together and just talk about things that make us happy. So, are there any questions? Yeah.
So I've seen videos of you playing and things. Sometimes it looks like you move, you're about to play an idea or something. I mean, it looks like you're holding yourself back. Is that like you want to change of what something to think about a certain idea that might fit that or something like that?
Great question. I think, sometimes an idea changes from the time you get from here to here, And it's unfair to commit to an idea from here, and then as you're going, if you know it's not the right thing, it's a injustice to play that idea, right? So I think for me, it comes back to the idea of being as present as I can, and just trying to, at all moments, be making these little, very small decisions in each moment, and always in relationship with the music around me. And sometimes, I like when stuff goes wrong a little bit, Like I was up here before, and Dave was helping me with the stands, and he was cranking all of these. I said, no, leave them, because nothing will happen, but if something happened to slip or something, that's going to be a really cool moment, because I'm going to have to adjust to that new experience. And it's those things that really force you to be present. Because if this cymbal fell down, I wouldn't just keep hitting where it used to be, right? So I have to adjust, I have to be in that moment and react. So sometimes I'm just trying to listen to the music around me, but also to my instincts, and just trying to make the best decision in that moment. So sometimes what I thought was the best decision is no longer half a second later. The last thing I practiced, here's the boring answer. It's pretty much the thing I've been practicing for the last 15 years. is playing eighth notes in time, but like really in time. Really, are they in time? But okay, let's really make them in time. And then I move to triplets and try to play those in time. And I play 16th notes, and I move between them pretty slow on a pad. And it's not always great. Some mornings I wake up and I can't play triplets in time. It's confusing, but that's actually what gives me the confidence to keep going. You know, if you can identify things in your playing at that fundamental place that need improvement, that's the eureka moment. Oftentimes we're searching for, things outside of our reach to grasp, but I've found there's so much we can do on the foundation to get stronger. So, that's what I practiced this morning when I was watching Netflix in my hotel room with a pad. So glad Netflix works in Europe now. It's so great. Yeah. Yeah, it would be scary to be on camera playing to a metronome, because then you guys can just tear me apart. But no, I think I always like to mix it up with and without a metronome whenever I'm practicing, because I don't want to fall into the trap of needing the metronome. I think the pulse, again, it's about creating it from within. And when you're playing with other musicians, usually there isn't a metronome, at least not in the musical situations I'm in. So I need to prepare for real life, and I think that also relates to where are you getting your ideas from. I'm so glad you have my book, but at the same time, I hope you notice the theme in a lot of the text, that the whole point is that you generate this stuff. So, because sometimes when we're practicing, we always have this source of content next to us. So we run out of ideas and we look over and we magically have more ideas, So I think the idea is to start generating that stuff inside so that you're never in a situation where you need that from the outside. So a similar analogy to the metronome. Yeah. Did everyone hear that question? So playing with another musician, David Bowie is a good example. I had the life-changing experience of getting to work with him, and all of those songs on the record had demos where he programmed the drum parts. So I was as happy as I could possibly be playing the parts that David Bowie invented. I think I'm grateful to have the opportunity to play with a lot of musicians that I admire and look up to. So one of my most important goals is to make them happy, elevate the music as much as I can. So in the case of David's record, there's songs, with a pretty clear form, and a lot of the beats that he programmed were really interesting. For example, the first track, called Black Star, has somewhat unusual beat, but that was the beat on his demo, and I just tried to bring it to the acoustic drums in an organic way. So the first thing that I always try to do is make the other musicians happy, and if I can be myself in doing so, that's even better, but I have to maintain that order of things. And also, speaking of people with specific drum parts, it's often really cool to hear non-drummer ideas. He's not a drummer, so when he sits down at his machine to create a beat, he's coming from a whole other place that I don't have access to, because I went to music school and I've practiced too much to not think about it. So I always usually jump at the opportunity to try to convey those parts, because they're coming from a really interesting place. couple more. So many. Yeah, good question. I think a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about is just the ultimate goal of being present, because if I'm not truly here, how can I have any chance to play what needs to be played? So I think the main question is just, are you really here right now? And if so, then everything will fall into place, because I've worked on my sound, I've worked on my time and the feeling, and I've worked on coordination, and I've worked on all these things that I don't want to be thinking about when I'm playing. So if I'm thinking about that moment, I'm just kind of building, in real time, building the statement that I'd like to make, but I'm relying on all the tools I've been working on. So in my mind, practice is over here and playing music is over here. And it's scary when sometimes they get confused, So I try to keep them really far apart so that I'm never tempted to play something that in the exact way that I practiced it. So that goes back to practicing some boring stuff. If I was doing this, I would never be tempted to play that with other musicians, and that's important. That's important. So I'm building very clear. There's a clear identity of why I'm doing that, and then when I get into a musical situation, I know what I can draw from. I'd like to play a little more, if that's okay, before we go our separate ways. Maybe I'll create a new restriction. I cheated a little bit before because I put this little cymbal thing on the snare, so it wasn't, I added a sound, but I hope you forgive me. Let's try this. Maybe I'll put this cymbal on here. Paperclip. And, okay, so now my goal is to not play the bass drum as long as I can until I'm going to explode. Okay? So let's see what happens. I mean, the idea of playing the drums without the bass drum is frightening. And this is a really silly idea to do it in public. But I'm going to see what happens. And until it boils inside of me, I'm going to introduce the bass drum. And we'll see how that changes the music. And to make it extra difficult, I have to keep my foot on the pedal. I can't move it off, okay? Feel my pain already? Let's see what happens. So I started off scared, but as I got going, I was like, wait, I can find new solutions. Eventually, I found that maybe like a buzz on the snare drum started to replace the roll of a bass drum. It's quite a different sound, but psychologically, it really felt like, wait, I'm not allowed to play the bass drum. I have to search what's the lowest sound I can make now. So it kind of felt like this. In comparison, that became the bass drum to what was available to me. So I've never thought of a buzz on the snare drum being used as a bass drum. But now, thanks to this frightening situation, I now know that that's available to me, right? So it's this self-exploration and pushing the limits of my creativity and what I think a snare on the buzz on the snare means. It doesn't have to mean the fill going into the crash on one. It can actually maybe serve as a completely different musical tool. So thank you again for your attention. I hope you can take some of this stuff home with you. Doesn't matter what kind of music you play. Doesn't matter what kind of kit you have. You know, any quality instrument has a whole world of music inside of it ready. It's begging you to extract this music from it. So I hope you feel inspired to do so. Thank you to the London Drum Show for this opportunity. I love London, and I love drums, and I love shows. So this is it. But thank you really to, again, you know, also I'm relying on the drums and the cymbals and all this equipment to give me inspiration. So these Gretsch drums and Sabian cymbals and these Vic Firth sticks, Remo drum heads, they help me discover these things. So thank you for coming on the journey with me. See you soon.